Welcome to the replay of our virtual Green Drinks August Spotlight on Ecology Ottawa. We welcomed Natasha Jovanovic, Cheryl Randall, and Summer Bioblitz to tell us about the work they're doing with Ecology Ottawa. Enjoy this replay. Welcome everybody to Virtual Green Drinks August 2021. For those of you who don't know me, I am Nick Hebb with SmartNet Alliance. The Alliance is a group of businesses and organizations who are working and collaborating on projects and initiatives to accelerate Canada's transition to a sustainable economy. And we learned this week that we need to speed up that acceleration. So thanks so much for everybody for supporting. For more information on SmartNet Alliance, consult our website. I'll add that into chat shortly, as well as some of our social media links so you can follow along. Be sure to check out our membership page with all our members on there, where you can go and learn all about what they're doing. We've got passive home builders, solar installers, battery technicians, everything you can think of for sustainability. And many of them will be out October 2nd for our sustainability event. So stay tuned to our Eventbrite for the ticket link on that. So tonight we're excited to feature 3 members from the team over at Ecology Ottawa. Ecology Ottawa is a non-profit organization. It's grassroots and volunteer driven. They strive to create sustainable communities where clean energy, air, water, and public transit, active transportation, and green space protection take priority, all good things. They provide residents with information and tools needed to understand local environmental issues and promote environmental leadership. So tonight we welcome Natasha Jovanovic, Cheryl Randall, and Summer Bioblitz to Green Drinks August. So thanks so much. They'll have their presentations coming up. Natasha will present first, followed by Cheryl, and then we've got Summer. So we'll bring in Natasha. So Natasha is the Living City Program Manager. She is passionate about the natural world and fascinated by the societies that live within it. After completing her bachelor's in sociology and geography at the U of O, she knew her career would focus on environmental protection and restoration. Natasha's interests include archaeology, biodiversity, social movement theory, which she was able to research during her field trip to Brazil. During her free time, she enjoys swimming, cycling, and crafting. So welcome in. Natasha, you'll have to unmute yourself. Just a reminder to share your screen. And thanks so much for joining us at Green Drinks August. Excited to hear about the work you're up to.
Thanks so much for that lovely introduction. Let me just get my screen shared here. This one. All right, you guys can see that?
Yep, that's coming through great. Thanks so much.
Awesome, fabulous. All right, so like Nick said, I will be talking about urban biodiversity and rewilding. And before getting started, I wanted to let you guys all know that while I've done a bunch of research and had the privilege of collaborating with some really amazing experts on biodiversity, pollinators, and trees in Ottawa, I'm not a certified arborist. I'm not an ecologist. We consider ourselves to be community organizers at Ecology Ottawa. And kind of generalists. So with that being said, do put all your questions in the chat box and I'll do my very best to answer what I can. If you have any specific questions about like a tree on your property, for example, I might be able to point you in the direction of someone who could answer better than myself. Before we get started, I also wanted to acknowledge that today I am joining from the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people that is now known as Ottawa. And I think this is particularly important to acknowledge today at this presentation because of what I'm talking about. This whole concept of naturalization, of nature-based solutions to climate change is gaining a lot of popularity right now, and it's really, really exciting. However, I think it's really important that we acknowledge that a lot of the practices that we are talking about are in fact traditional Indigenous knowledge. These things are not new, and I would hate to present them as such. Like I said, it's wonderful that governments around the world are slowly but surely starting to embrace these practices, but I want to be very clear that they did not come up with them and neither did we. I encourage you to keep that in mind, not only throughout this presentation, but also in your day-to-day lives as these topics become more popular and more mainstream. Let's not forget where they originated from. So as Nick has already mentioned, we are a not-for-profit, grassroots, volunteer-driven organization with the mandate to make Ottawa the green capital of Canada. And we work to achieve this in two main ways. We work, the first is very community-focused, where we're giving the residents tools they need to not only understand environmental issues within the area, but also to make positive changes within their communities and neighborhoods. And as we do that, we're what we call sort of finding our friends. We're finding the people in Ottawa who truly care about the same issues that we care about. Really, we're trying to bring together this whole network of people who care for the environment. So then we're able to do the second thing, which we do, which is holding City Hall accountable for the environmental decisions they make. And often we are urging City Hall to make better decisions for us and our shared environment. So all of the work that we do is split up into three main programs that you can see on the screen: the Active City, Renewable City, and the Living City. Very briefly, I don't want to steal Sana and Cheryl's thunder, but so I'll say the Active City focuses on healthy transportation issues, the Renewable City focuses on climate change issues, and the Living City focuses on trees, green space, and water type issues. So the two active campaigns we have on the Living City side of things right now are our tree and biodiversity campaign, which I'll be talking about here. And we've been spearheading climate action in Ottawa for over a decade now, and we're really excited to be able to spearhead biodiversity as well. All right, so I won't dwell on this slide too much, but we're quickly going to talk about just biodiversity in general before we get into our program. I was actually asked not too long ago what is the biggest climate problem that keeps me up at night? And my answer immediately was biodiversity decline, all in Ottawa and all over the world. And I'm sure I don't have to tell many of you guys that species are going extinct at 1,000 times the natural rate. In Canada alone, we have over 700 species at risk, over 60 of which live in the Ottawa area. And those facts really do keep me up at night, but I think what actually worries me more is that so many people seem to not understand the significance of what this actually means. When we talk about biodiversity decline, of course, at the surface level, we're talking about a decrease of the variety of life on Earth, which I could go on about for a while, but it's so much more than that. We as humans rely on healthy ecosystems to survive. These healthy and biodiverse ecosystems provide us with what are called ecosystem services. And some of them are listed on I love this graphic here that you see. And so another thing that people kind of often will say when we talk about urban biodiversity is, why bother? We should really be focusing on protecting these like large swaths of green space up north or in the tropics or something. And as you can see from these maps, most species at risk are actually found in the most densely populated areas of the country, which means that cities have an essential role to play in conserving biodiversity. This is especially true when you consider that by 2050, 70% of the world's 9 billion people will be living in cities. Urban areas are rapidly expanding, and if we're going to preserve biodiversity, preserve those ecosystem services that we rely so heavily upon, we as a society have to start reimagining our relationship with nature. Plus, if we want to combat climate change, we need to seriously start integrating nature-based solutions into our city planning. So what does that mean? You guys may have heard before various terms: nature-based approaches, natural climate solutions, nature-based solutions to climate change, a bunch of combinations of those words thrown together, all include actions such as better ecosystem management and the integration of natural infrastructure in cities. So one of the ways that we can do this is by Rewilding Ottawa, and that is what our biodiversity campaign is all about. So first of all, before we get into our campaign, what on earth are we talking about? What is rewilding? We use rewilding and naturalization interchangeably here. And what it is a method of conservation that helps nature thrive. In urban spaces in particular, rewilding is all about, like I said, reimagining our relationship with nature. It involves deliberate planting of native species and allowing this vegetation to become established through natural regeneration. It's the opposite of a manicured grass lawn. However, I do really like to highlight that it is not the extreme opposite of a manicured grass lawn. And so what I mean by that is that we are not advocating for a complete removal of human involvement in green space management. That's not what this is. We believe there needs to be a balance. We as a species cannot be removed from nature. We are a part of nature, and frankly, we need to learn how to coexist a little bit better with our the natural environment. So, as I mentioned earlier, cities around the world are embracing this idea of rewilding. These are just some snippets of headlines and initiatives that I took a few months ago now. And so if Ottawa is serious about a green and just recovery from the COVID pandemic, rewilding initiatives absolutely must be prioritized. So I promise this is the only slide I'm actually going to read out to you, but this is our biodiversity petition that I've actually just put in the chat, and I encourage you guys to all go sign it if you haven't already. So the text is, we are urging council to take ambitious action to conserve and restore nature in Ottawa by making bold financial and political commitments to rewild our city. We are urging council to amend bylaws to encourage residents to transform yards and boulevards, which are like the little strips of lawn or space between the road and the sidewalk, boulevards into naturalized gardens, allocate more money to naturalization through city park budgets, increase naturalization targets for city parks, and prioritize conservation of existing green space, which we're going to talk about, and educate the public on the benefits of rewilding. So let's break some of these down a little bit. That first point, naturalized yards and boulevards. There are actually several City of Ottawa bylaws that could be substantially improved to not only allow residents to have naturalized gardens, but to actually encourage planting that supports urban biodiversity and provides critical habitat for pollinators. The property standards, property maintenance, and use and care of roads bylaw in particular come to mind. And while there are certainly legitimate health and safety concerns, for example, road visibility, that these bylaws address, the way they are currently written result in more residents sticking to those grass lawns, despite knowing that those perfect manicured grass lawns are a desert for pollinators and most wildlife. Residents are often reluctant to take their chances with these bylaws for fear of having to tear up their garden or get fined. This fear and uncertainty is a major barrier for Ottawans who would like to support urban biodiversity. And I actually just wanted to take a moment and credit where I got these images from a wonderful woman, Berit Erickson, who has a great website, thecornerpollinatorgarden.net, that I'd highly recommend you guys check out. She has a beautiful garden and kind of explains, she goes above and beyond to educate people about why her garden looks this way, and she even gives tips on how to do this kind of rewilding in spite of these bylaws. So for example, anything she puts on boulevards, she doesn't sort of buy them from nurseries. She will grow them from seed, and so if bylaw comes to tear everything up, she hasn't made this huge investment that just gets torn up. So it's not ideal. There's ways around it, but it could definitely be substantially improved. All right, and then this next point, more naturalization in city parks. The city's existing naturalization targets will remain ineffective unless more money is allocated to meet and maintain them. It's essential for city staff to be provided with the resources needed to plant and maintain these rewilded spaces. And some of these include proper signage and proper training on how to manage these spaces, including how to mitigate safety concerns such as ticks and wild parsnips. So for example, the lack of signage has actually resulted in the accidental mowing of small trees and taller plants in areas that were actually meant to be left to grow. And plus, when you consider long-term maintenance, naturalization practices will actually reduce maintenance work and cost in the long run. And I grabbed this really great graphic from a initiative in Europe called Naturalization that I'd highly recommend you guys check out if you're interested in this stuff. It's a pretty good one. Here we go. Okay, more green space protection. So many Ottawa residents assume that natural spaces are protected. However, poorly planned developments and inadequate protection measures continue to pose a threat to our local green spaces. Protecting vulnerable green spaces in Ottawa means demanding more sustainable patterns of development across the city, like the ones listed here. And so Mag already beat me to it in her green update that she put at the beginning. But speaking of green space protection, there's actually three developments I'd like to highlight today. So there's the new Civic Hospital at the Central Experimental Farm, there's the Embassy Road development in Mechanicsville, and there's the Autos BMW dealership in the Hunt Club Forest. And I invite you guys to join us this Sunday for the, or Reimagine Ottawa, and the Raging Grannies and Ecology Ottawa will all be there. There will be a mass choir, lament for the trees, speeches, and a bit of a ceremony. We invite you to come and wear green to represent the trees. We're gathering to ask City Hall to send the new Civic Hospital plan back to the drawing board. The recently released hospital plan breaks a promise to put the parking garage underground and will doom 523 trees because of the area to be cleared, not only for hospital buildings, but other buildings and other parking lots. With the climate crisis underway, it's particularly irresponsible to remove trees, especially when other alternatives are available. So I'm going to put here a few links in the chat for us. So here's the link for the Lament the Trees event or rally this weekend. I am also putting in the chat the Facebook group for the Save the Hunt Club Forest. And then here's a big, long, ugly link, my apologies, for the petition about the Embassy Road development in Mechanicsville. Okay, so with that, we're going to kind of go back to our petition. And just the last point is more education. Educating the public on the benefits of rewilding in urban areas is essential. It is still a common misconception that rewilding initiatives mean that absolutely no maintenance will be done. A lot of people have a fear that these areas will become ugly hazards, and this just couldn't be farther from the truth when done properly. And of course, maintenance needs to be done, but in a way that complements the type of naturalized area. So for example, areas that are intended to grow trees still need to be spot checked and treated for invasive species on a regular basis. It's entirely possible to have naturalized areas that provide critical habitat for pollinators and other wildlife, while also being beautiful and safe for residents and tourists to enjoy. So on the heels of the education bit, I wanted to share 6 quick tips on how to create a pollinator garden. And I know it's not quite the springtime, but the third point is kind of relevant soon. So some of these tips, the most important one is to use native plants. We want to really encourage you guys to, when you're thinking about planting your garden next year, prioritize plants that are native to this, the Eastern Ontario environment. If you're in Ottawa or wherever you are, use a variety of flowers and shapes and colors. This will attract a variety of different pollinators that like different kinds of flowers. This is the one that you can keep in mind soon when it gets to be fall time. Let plant debris stand over winter. Don't bother raking, it's all right. That leaf litter is really important habitat for pollinators to overwinter in. And again, the next point, use a mix of plants that bloom at different times of the year to attract different pollinators again. add some flat rocks, which I didn't know, but butterflies really love to chill out on some flat rocks if you'd like to encourage more butterflies in your garden. And also adding water elements like bird baths and bee houses can be really great things to do as well. But you don't need to have a pollinator garden to champion biodiversity. Another way that you can sort of contribute is helping monitor Ottawa's ecosystems. And I promise it's not as hard as it sounds, but if you've got a camera and internet connection, you can participate. So what you do is you get outside, explore your nearby nature, take pictures of the plants and critters that you come across, take pictures of the ones you can identify, the ones you can't identify, the ones that look kind of funny, the ones you think you see all the time, and the ones you've never seen before. Anything and everything is great. And what's really great about iNaturalist, which I really love, it's a fantastic global database of natural observations. It's free to download and make an account. And you don't have to know the name of the species that you're uploading to participate. So that's really great for people like myself who don't know the Latin name of all the plants I come across. Nice. I'm so glad you're using iNaturalist. And yeah, please join our project, Ecology Ottawa's Bioblitz. But quickly, like I was saying, other naturalists on the app can help you identify your observations, as well as iNaturalist will actually auto-generate some suggestions for you, which are not 100% accurate, but it's pretty accurate. It's astounding. All right. So I couldn't end my presentation without talking a little bit about our tree giveaways. We have embarked on the largest tree giveaway in Ottawa's history. This season, we had 15,000 trees to distribute, and we've distributed a record number of almost 9,500 trees, of those trees, to over 3,000 participants throughout Ottawa from June till now. We gave away 12,000 trees in 2019, and we've just been blown away this year by the demand that we've seen. So how it works is we've been teaming up with dozens of amazing community partners who are co-hosting tree giveaways with us across the city. This includes community associations, local businesses, organizations, schools, faith-based institutions, and even individuals in order to provide as many Ottawans as possible with tree seedlings to green up their neighborhood. These seedlings are free. You just have to fill out a survey, and they're intended to be planted on your private property. So obviously this year is a bit different because of the pandemic, but we've still got a schedule packed full of events. Thank you, James, for sharing our iNaturalist project in the chat, by the way. And here is our calendar of tree events. You can also access the pre-participation survey. You can fill it out online ahead of time. You don't have to we don't want to encourage too much gathering still. So the survey is available online. And this Saturday, we will be in Orleans with the Rotary Club of Orleans and the Rotary Climate Action Team. And on Sunday morning, we'll be at the Ottawa Artisans Market. And today is a bit special. Actually, I don't usually have trees at my home, but I have trees at my home today because I went to the nursery this morning to pick some up for this weekend. So this weekend we will have available, oh, it's blurry here, cute little white spruces, as well as white cedars, which are super, sorry, the blur is not cooperating. And then these beautiful, these are the big ones, the white birch. Anyways, so those are the ones that we'll have this weekend. If I encourage you guys, if you are interested in getting the either white birch or white cedar, we have less of those. We'll probably only have them on Saturday. So definitely come see us in Orleans tomorrow, or excuse me, on Saturday, if you would like to snag any of those. And that is it for my section of this Ecology Ottawa presentation. I'd love to answer any of your questions if you have any. I don't know how much time, Nick, we have.
Yeah, we definitely, thanks so much, Natasha. We definitely have time for a couple of questions. I've got one or two in chat already that I'll sort of quarterback over to you. Anybody else who has questions, please do add into chat now and we can get a couple more over. Brent was wondering, is there any consideration to address the peer pressure from homeowners have to keep a pristine green lawn? That whole keeping up with the Joneses, I guess, there with the green lawn.
I think a lot of that really does boil down to further education. I mean, Barrett, the woman who has the garden that I mentioned, she just went fully above and beyond. She has like brochures out there, I think, that people can take. But I know that we're definitely trying to put out a lot of content to sort of encourage, you know, you don't need a pristine green lawn. I also think that amending those bylaws and getting the city more involved in encouraging people to create more biodiverse lawns would be a huge step for us. But I know that's definitely one that's going to be difficult for a lot of people who are really attached to their green lawns. So I think a lot of little steps are what's good for that.
Yeah, no, and I was also wondering, you know, we keep hearing about these famous cases of people having food gardens in their front yard, having to tear them down, all this type of stuff. What exactly is the bylaw in Ottawa for folks who want to who grow food on their front yard? Is it something that's prohibited right now?
It's not prohibited on their front lawn, but it isn't allowed on the boulevards, which is what a lot of people want to do, because essentially it's just a patch of grass there with maybe like a small tree on it. So that's one of the ones that we could, if we were to amend some of those bylaws I had mentioned, to allow residents to actually plant on those boulevards. That would include the food as well.
Oh, that's great. No, great idea. There's so many of those out there. So talk to me a little bit about these petitions. I know I live not far from sort of the Bayview one, and I see that sign, more trees, not embassies. I really like that slogan. And especially around the Civic Hospital, is the ask not to build at all, or is the ask to kind of build around? Talk to me about what some of the asks are for this petition. Is it completely, you know, don't build on this land? Is it, you know, sort of a mixed use? What are some of the things that you're after with those petitions?
Absolutely. So, well, the one I linked in the chat for the Mechanicsville development, and I believe the Hunt Club development as well, those ones are not finalized yet, and people are very much, the ask is not to build them on that land, especially the well, both of them, but especially the Embassy Row. No, both of them, sorry, I can't pick one, that's more ridiculous to me. Yeah, it's not to build them. And then for the hospital development, we are asking for the plan to be really sent back to the drawing board. The plan that came out is just really impractical with the amount of trees that would get torn down specifically for parking lots, and even a parking lot that sort of is just intended for construction workers rather than like to build the hospital. And so, yeah, it's smarter development, which is what we're all about at Ecology Ottawa.
Yeah, no, fantastic work. So, you know, keep it up. We hope, we certainly hope to see, you know, more trees rather than embassies. We know, especially with this heat, you know, one tree can pull down the temperature so much in a neighborhood. So you can imagine what 50 would do, right? So amazing work. Thanks so much. I know you're going to stick around and be a little part of a general discussion and be around for anybody's follow-up questions, but really appreciate your presentation. Just a reminder to stop share and we'll roll over to Cheryl, but thanks so much, Natasha. Great work. And yeah, let's keep Ottawa an amazing green place, right? You know, it can slip away so quickly if we're not, you know, diligent and watching it. So great work, and we hope everybody supports that. So next we're going to go over to Cheryl Randall, and she is the climate change campaign organizer over at Ecology Ottawa. She is an Oxford graduate and former lawyer in London. She left corporate law in search of inspiration in nature, and you can't blame her there. She worked as an expedition leader in the polar regions since 2013 and acquired experience in sustainable tourism industry by managing wildlife encounters in the Canadian Arctic. Well, that's some great experience. She is now dedicated to Ottawa's ecological conservation as a climate change campaign organizer. This opportunity fills her with a passionate desire to further her career by adding value where she can in the push for stewardship around the world and engaging citizens in local environmental projects. So welcome, Cheryl. Thanks so much for being here. You can unmute and bring up your presentation.
Great. Thanks so much, Nick. I had a friend of mine write that for me because I'm not the best at writing about myself. So sorry if it's a bit over the top. Okay, now tell me, can you see my slides? Oh.
Yeah, you're coming in, I think you're kind of in preview mode there, but we can definitely see it, yeah.
Great, okay. Excellent.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you're coming in great now.
Wonderful, thank you. So first, I just want to say thanks very much for inviting us. It's great to be able to talk to you all about what we're doing. And I'm going to try not to teach people how to suck eggs. I've seen amongst a group of people here that there are lots of very, what's the right word, passionate environmentalists in the group. So I will explain some background to some of the projects that I'm working on, but please take it with a pinch of salt if I'm already telling you stuff that you know. I apologize in advance. I'm going to talk about 3 campaigns that I happen to be working on at the moment. I'm working on many other things at the same time. So if somebody has questions about any of those later, then of course we can get into that too. The first campaign I'd like to talk about is our Breathe Easy campaign. And some of you may recognize the name or indeed the little logo here. This campaign was started by Ecology Ottawa last year in 2020, and we got more funding this spring from the Trottier Family Foundation, and we are super excited to be able to continue it this summer. So to give you an overview for those of you for whom this is new, it's an air quality monitoring program. We are running it in collaboration with Sierra Club Canada, the Ottawa chapter. And last year, it was Ottawa's largest community-led science project, and we already have over 100 volunteers this year, so it's looking like it's going to be pretty much the same status this year. And volunteers go to specific sites across the city, and they measure the air quality with a little egg that we give them, and that data is then collected at the end of the summer. And the whole idea is that we increase awareness for residents, but also councillors and city staff about the air quality levels in Ottawa. So, of course, I'm sure everybody already knows that breathing clean air is vital to our health. But it is a growing challenge with the number of pollutants that we have in the air. So we don't really see it, or at least we rarely see it, let's say, but it is one of the most significant environmental challenges impacting public health. So it's avoidable, and as a cause of death globally, it's actually insane. You can see the figure here in the middle. 4.2 million deaths are estimated by the World Health Organization as created by air pollution, outside air pollution, I should say. And there's a whole list on here of all the different types of impacts that it can have on your health. And yeah, so we just want to make sure that people, that it's brought to people's attention, because of course, if you're walking around on a nice pleasant day, you might not think about it. But then all of a sudden, when you bring a monitor and you measure what's going on around you, it brings a slightly different perspective. So let's see who is most at risk. Seniors. By the time you reach your senior years, of course, your heart might be weaker, or your lungs, your immune system, they all might be weaker. And so the chances of having health problems like heart disease, lung disease are higher. And of course, air pollution will have a greater impact on seniors. And then the other category at the other end of the spectrum is children who have less developed respiratory and defense systems. And of course, because they're miniature, actually they inhale more air for their body weight compared to an adult, for example. So some of you, as I say, may have seen this. This was an interactive map that we produced in last year's campaign. And I just wanted to point out the sites where people were monitoring. So this is, it was basically based on 20 different locations across Ottawa. And this year we made some changes because you could look from your neighbourhood and see a data point quite close to you, but this year we wanted to try to improve the spread of data sites. So we increased it to 45 locations, and you can see we've put it equally kind of across Ottawa as much as possible. So the hope is then that residents can say, okay, here's my neighbourhood, and then there's a data site quite close to you. Each of those little dots gets monitored 3 times during the course of the summer. And then the idea is that they are averaged over the 3 monitors. So we get a good overview of Ottawa's air quality. And there will later in the year be an interactive map coming out just over as another layer over last year. So we'll be able to compare year on year. And the monitors that we're using do collect quite a lot of different data, but we are specifically looking at particulate matter 2.5, nitrogen dioxide and ozone. And I am not a scientist, as Natasha said, she's not a botanist or an arborist, but generally speaking, nitrogen dioxide you'll find coming out of diesel school buses quite a lot. Ozone, the chemicals come out of the tailpipe of lots of like cars, for example. And then when they hit sunlight, they interact with sunlight, and that can create ozone smog. And particulate matter 2.5, it's like solid particles in water vapor that move around in the air. And they are tiny, like much smaller than hair, for example, but they can get really deep into your lungs, hence why they cause so many respiratory problems. So they're the 3 that we are focusing on in the monitoring, just because they are the pollutants most harmful to human health. Here you can see 3 of our wonderful volunteers, James, Carmen, and Barbara, and you can see the monitors that they are using. So you literally just take the monitor, kind of hang it on a pole or a tree, and you hang out there for about 7 minutes is the minimum. That's, yeah, some people, like if you're in a park, then they just sit there for, you know, as long as it takes for the dog to run around, which is great. And sorry, I just wanted to make sure that I covered something, but I've already gone past it. So it's, I've already missed my opportunity, but you can imagine. So we are not going to do all the averaging of the data until later, like once the summer's concluded. So our monitoring will run until the end of September. But on days starting, I think around the kind of 19th of July, when we saw the smoke coming in from the forest fires in Northern Ontario, you can imagine that we saw crazy spikes on the air quality monitoring. Okay, and we are trying with our campaign to make sure that the whole thing is framed with a pretty big equity lens. So of course, with the vulnerable populations of seniors and children, we've put some of our monitoring locations specifically on schools or on your seniors' residences, so we get direct data from those types of sites. And then there's going to be another layer on the map this year that's going to show locations of all the schools, all the daycares, all the seniors' residences and hospitals. And that way, where the monitoring locations are kind of more equally distributed, you'll be able to interpolate much more easily what the air pollution is like at every location, basically across Ottawa. And then there's going to be another layer on the map as well, which is looking at neighbourhood data based on the population density, the racialized population, and the affluence of the neighbourhood. And so, yeah, the idea is then to be able to say, okay, well, is there an inequity of a poorer neighbourhood, for example? Do they have worse air pollution? Okay, now you can get involved by signing up to be a volunteer, of course. Lots of different things that you could do if you were interested. Of course, monitoring the air quality. If you're kind of social media savvy, it would be great to have you on board to help with the campaign in that respect. People with skills on data management or mapping, also very welcome. And then everybody can expect the report from this year to be out kind of the end of October or November this year. So I'm going to ask Nick, do we have any questions already on Breathe Easy, or should I just carry on?
No, yeah, I think we're good. Well, yeah, just carry on. I've got one or two at the end, but carry on, and we'll circle back for questions. Thanks. Perfect.
Okay, great. So the second project that I'm working on that I'd love to talk to you about is the People's Official Plan. And I'm sure many of you will know that the official plan, the revised draft official plan, is coming out at the moment, kind of as we speak. And the People's Official Plan is really trying to frame an alternative vision for the growth and development of the city. So the People's Official Plan is more than 21 different organizations, and we're working very much as an alliance. From these little logos, I hope you can see that there's quite a range of organizations. So someone like cafes or the FCA would have a huge number of community associations as members. And then we've got a whole section that's more on the equity side of things, like Cowie or Just Food, or the Alliance to End Homelessness. And then, yeah, Ecology Ottawa falls somewhere kind of in the middle, looking at the environmental side. So what we're trying to do is bring together views on everything that makes a good city. Yeah, and we think, of course, that we're getting it right. So we were launched, as it were, in 2019, and since then we've been meeting very regularly, like every couple of weeks type of thing, and there's been some large public workshop events with hundreds of people attending. And let me just get that down there. The timeline has been fairly critical. So depending on how much attention you've been paying in the news today, you may know some of these updates, but the draft official plan was published in November last year. All residents across the city were expected over the Christmas holidays to review the document that was 264 pages plus dozens of pages of schedules by February. Luckily, that was extended to the 12th of March, but still not very long. Now the revised draft is being released in chapters over the summer holidays this time. So of course, lots of people are out of town. And there was going to be a joint planning and ARAC meeting, committee meeting on the 13th, starting on the 13th of September. And today that has been postponed a month to the 14th of October because they realized that people cannot consume or review and provide feedback on that amount of complexity and technical language in such a long document in such a short amount of time. And then the anticipated council approval would be the 27th of October. So just to give you a rough idea of what the process has been so far and where we are right now. I am not going to go into detail on the key issues that we find problematic in the draft official plan or the revised draft for several reasons. It would take a long time and some of you will not be interested in some of the information. It's very complex, and as they're they're publishing the chapters piecemeal. We actually just received chapter 4, for example, and it takes a lot of time to go through and review that in detail. So some of the issues we're still working on, but in any case, there is definitely room for improvement in providing the housing that we need in the city, especially deeply affordable housing. Yeah, we really need some serious targets for deeply affordable housing in the plan. In terms of green and healthy choices, we actually have a petition which calls for a 40% tree canopy per neighbourhood. So the city has said they want 40% across the whole city, but that includes the enormous green belt. And so it means that by the time you get to a neighbourhood level, that might be a really very tiny number. Yeah, so you will have felt walking around over the last few days with this extreme heat that we really need nice, shady, walkable roadways. So yeah, we're definitely pushing for that. Targets need to be in the plan, because how else do we measure whether we have made progress in the right direction? The plan is for 25 years, so it's pretty important that it's measurable or monitorable. There needs to be a lot of work on renewable energy, protection from climate damage. We would say that there is very little consideration of climate change at all in the official plan, which, considering where we are right now, and especially in view of the IPCC's report out on Monday, it just isn't good enough. And there's no financial plan within the official plan. There's been no assessment, as far as we can tell, of one solution being more cost effective than another solution, for example. So that's another thing that we're calling for. Okay, so in order to get involved on the official plan, there are lots of things that you could do. This says that so the People's Official Plan, sorry, I should take a step back, held a workshop on the 26th of July, just going over what the key issues are. And now the next step is to have a meeting where we can work on political mobilization. So making sure that we have deputations to get the changes that we need, where councillors can make a motion, for example, and then we can support their motions. Writing to your councillor, visiting your councillor, anything that you really wanted to do, including writing op-eds or indeed signing the Defend the Trees petition, all in light of the revisions coming out of the draft official plan. So this says that the second of 2 workshop is planned for the 24th of August. That is now tentatively the 15th of September. But if you're interested, that will go up on the Ecology Ottawa website, all in good time. So I'm just going to pause for a second in case Nick wants to fire any questions at me, and so that you can all take a breath and I can take a breath.
Yeah, no, a few came up regarding air quality, but if you want to kind of finish out your slides, and then we can circle back on those.
Great. Okay, excellent. So the third and final project that I wanted to talk about is in relation to 15-minute neighbourhoods. This is under a grant from the Alva Foundation. And I'm sorry, what I should have mentioned earlier was that the Ottawa Community Foundation funds the People's Official Plan. And so we have been running workshops within neighbourhoods to see how we could transition to what we call a 15-minute neighbourhood, and outlining the best way to get there, essentially. I will leave this up here for a minute and try not to speak at too much length to it. The problem that this is hopefully addressing is urban sprawl, and Buildings at 45% and transportation at 44% are the biggest emitters that Ottawa has, and of greenhouse gases. Sorry, I'm sure that you know that already, but and within those two sectors, it's residential buildings and road transportation, which are the largest of each. And so that basically means that if Ottawa is serious about meeting its emissions reductions targets, then it must do something about transportation and residential housing. However, we are faced with this issue of urban sprawl, where generally speaking, low density housing kind of expands continuously out from the centre. And I know some of you in the room were involved in May 2020 when there was a vote to expand the urban boundary against lots of protest. And so in light of that urban boundary expansion, we need something that can help mitigate the increased emissions that you have from so many extra kilometres of road travel from your home to your commute, from your home to all of the things that you need in your everyday life. So what we consider as a solution is a 15-minute neighbourhood. And I'll just say at the beginning that you could also call this a walkable neighbourhood, and you could also call this a livable neighbourhood, especially if you're thinking from a senior's point of view or somebody who had mobility issues. The idea is just that you can access around your neighbourhood more easily. So a 15-minute neighbourhood would mean that you can walk or bike or indeed use your mobility aid to access things around you in your neighbourhood. So the infrastructure, of course, needed for that means that you need your sidewalks ploughed in the winter so that you can still move around. You need to have bike lanes that are protected from fast-moving traffic, and potholes, just and access, of course, for mobility restricted people. So there are some definite infrastructure issues right from the beginning, or not issues, but needs, infrastructure needs. And then the idea is that the neighbourhood is nice to walk in, because we know that if the area is nice to walk in, you're more likely to walk. And when I say we know that, I mean studies show that. And so you want plenty of green space, tree canopy cover, parks where you can, get there by foot or bike, and of course providing cleaner air. And along your route, you need benches to stop on and chat to your friends if we're not in COVID times. And then you need some things to go to, so destinations within your neighbourhood. So a 15-minute neighbourhood needs a grocery store that you can walk to. It probably needs a library that you can walk to, a pharmacy, cafes, restaurants, hardware stores, corner stores, the things that you would access in your everyday life, all within walking distance. That is the aim. And of course, for some of these, like a recreation centre, a community centre, for example, or a library, you need a certain population density in your neighbourhood in order to support that. Not just because you need people to work in a shop, for example, or a cafe, or to be the lifeguard at a swimming pool, but also because you need to raise the taxes to pay for those community amenities. So finally, sometimes you will want to leave your neighbourhood, so you need walkable access to frequent, reliable public transit. And I wonder how many people in the fringes of Ottawa feel like they have frequent, reliable, any of the good things about public transit. I suspect not all that many though. Okay, so why do we want them? Hopefully that gives you a bit of an explanation of why we want them. But for us at Ecology Ottawa, we are focusing very much on the walkability and that transition from car dependency, just so that your car isn't your only option, and promoting you know, healthier lifestyle, for example, definitely reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and the social connections that come with walking around your, you know, local streets more, because you chat with the people who are sat on their porch and the kids who are playing in the park and all of those good things. So one thing we've been doing is running a series of neighbourhood workshops, as I mentioned. The idea is that then we produce a report and we send that to city planning staff. We're talking to residents specifically because they know their neighbourhood best. And so what we're looking for are the missing pieces so that we can get to this walkable, complete community. And the way that we decided to do it was to partner with Walkable Ottawa, because of course, as I'm not sure how familiar you are with them, but they're a small volunteer-driven organisation as well, and they're focused very much on walkable neighbourhoods. And we've had other people at our workshops, like Greenspace Alliance, even an environmental psychology professor. And so far we've run 3 of them, one in Cityview, one in Alta Vista, and one in Overbrook, which was focused on protecting the tree canopy during infill/intensification, which is of course a critical piece of the puzzle. And so those reports, I can put a link later in the chat if you're interested in seeing those. But basically, we try to get information from residents and transfer that knowledge to the city. That's the whole aim of what we're trying to do. And the reason we partner with Walkable Ottawa is because they have modelling expertise that gives you this type of information where you can, as a resident, look at your neighbourhood and see how your neighbourhood could change over time with different decisions made. So, for example, here, after a few years, you can see that there's a kind of transitional bike lane being put in, and they've started to plant trees, and they will slowly, of course, over time, start to provide some shade in your neighbourhood. And then you can see the bike lane has been made into a permanent bike lane where you're protected from the road or from the cars. And you can see there's been some changes in the zoning, presumably because now there's a cafe here, and that will help residents as they're moving around their neighbourhood to feel a little bit more engaged in the streetscape that they're walking around, as well as provide the destination, of course. And then also under their modelling expertise, they're able to look at density and show, unbelievably, if you can get your head there, which I can't really, this tower block here, so that you've got a tower block at the beginning, and then you've got kind of low-rise apartments below, and then in the bottom section you've got these in grey 2.5-storey multi-units. And it turns out that you can get more density with 2.5-storey multi-units spread throughout a neighbourhood than by just putting enormous tower blocks in, which has been a huge eye-opener for me personally, and of course for lots of other people. So this type of modelling expertise is what we need for residents to be able to see the changes that would be made in their neighbourhood, and what should be in the official plan and is not in the official plan. Anyway, so I just want to touch quickly on specifically the walkable, the workshop where we talked about protecting the tree canopy. Because of course it does tie, I mean, back to Natasha's trees, it does tie directly into our climate emergency. And we know that we're losing a lot of trees, not just to disease and age, but also to infill projects. And this January, there was a bylaw improvement, which apparently has been quite successful so far, to protect trees during construction. But there are still problems, of course, with infill and tree root space. And so we were trying to look at how we could preserve trees during the process of intensification. So again, if you're interested in that, then you can have a look at our report on the workshop, or indeed there's some YouTube video clips on the website. Okay, so if you wanted to be involved in these projects, then we are planning for late October a 4th neighbourhood workshop. It's not yet decided exactly the date, so if you keep an eye on our website, you can sign up when it is decided. And you can also sign our 15-minute neighbourhood petition. And I'm just going to put a little shout out to Mag Carson, who I know is in the audience, because she has been working on a calling campaign with us on getting people to sign the 15-minute neighbourhood petition. And she is our prize winner, highest caller in our little tiny but mighty group. So thanks very much, Mag. We love you. Okay, I have finally reached the end, and I'm really sorry if I just spoke and spoke and spoke.
Yeah, no worries, Cheryl. There's some important stuff you're working on, so I think it's great. It's gives us a feel for what your day and maybe weeks like. A lot of great initiatives. So congrats on that. A couple of questions came through. I know the air quality sort of file is so relevant right now, especially with those forest fires. I know a few times this summer I've been out on my patio at the end of the day thinking, this is exactly what it must be like to live in LA, right? To see the sun setting and see that sort of haze. And, you know, so Brent was wondering, there seems to be a lot of air quality monitors available, but do you guys have any recommendations for monitors that would provide useful information to individuals to allow them to take real-time action? Or maybe just some of the better monitors out there as well. Is that something you guys recommend, or is there a brand that you guys are using?
Yeah, certainly. I can tell you the brand that we are using. I haven't, so they were bought last year at the beginning of last year's campaign. So I haven't done a 2021 review of all of them. And I know that they are getting smaller and smaller. So our friends at Environment Hamilton are running a campaign there as well. And their eggs are like this small. So although I can tell you ours, I suspect that when you go to look, you'll find something much smaller and easier to move around. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. There are lots on the market, and I just say have a close look at what other people say their accuracy is, which is why we're still with the slightly larger model, because we're happy with the accuracy. But I think if you just want to have a look around your neighborhood, no need to stress too much about that.
That's neat. And do we have an idea of where Ottawa ranks sort of nationally and globally on the air quality? Are we sort of middle of the pack? Are we as bad? Or are we kind of depending on the day?
Yeah, globally we rank pretty well. In fact, as an entire country, we rank pretty well, which is great. Yeah, during the course of this summer, certainly it varies very much from day to day. And yes, our air quality is slightly better than Toronto, and our air quality is slightly less good than much greener areas. So last year, for example, we measured the Arboretum, if you're familiar with it in Ottawa, every day, and it was consistently lower because of the trees taking in all the air pollution. So yeah, it really does depend. It actually depends even where you are in Ottawa. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's becoming something that's so much more relevant, right? So fabulous work there. I know we wanted to talk a couple questions on the People's Official Plan. I'm wondering, just a question from me, where's the stand that the People's Official Plan has on infills? Is it something that they see as a good thing? Is it sort of depending on the type of infill? I know, you know, we're going to see so many more. You drive down somewhere like Fisher Avenue and you see all these tiny little bungalows on huge pieces of land. So you know that those are going to, you know, become infills. So, you know, were you able to kind of come to some sort of conclusion on, you know, are infills good, bad? Is it a bit too hard to paint that brush, or?
The People's Official Plan and Ecology Ottawa both share the view that intensification in general is a good thing, because you already have all the infrastructure there that you need. You already have the road, you already have the path. You don't need to start clearing trees, or at least if, you know, rather than if you're some of those areas that Natasha's talking about clearing to put buildings in, is simply not on the same scale. The services are already there. All of those things mean that economically it's better. It means that you're not trying to drive people in from, you know, the Taywin project, for example, you know they're all going to have to drive in. You're hopefully already in an area where you have a lot of those services that you need for people to live a nice lifestyle. So no, and of course the main reason is because you're cutting the greenhouse gases, and not just on a, like, you know, let's put more buildings in the street, but if you have a multi-unit building, let's say those 2.5 story buildings that I was showing you earlier, then between the walls and the floors, you're sharing your heating and you're sharing your cooling. So on a house basis, like on a building basis, your greenhouse gas emissions are that much lower as well. So yeah, very much in favor of intensification, and intensification done well, I should say. And certainly where you talk about a small bungalow on a big plot, we are distinctly not talking about knocking down a small bungalow and putting up a one big house.
Yeah, no, for sure. Maybe the tiny homes in the back. So Lynn is wondering, how do we move away from building expanding suburbs that are not walkable or cycle friendly to building actual 15-minute neighborhoods? Yeah, well, that's exactly what we're working on. So first of all, we need to stop building outside of our urban boundary in the first place, or stop agreeing to expand it. Yeah, let's not even go back there. So if you already have, move away from expanding suburbs. Basically, there's a few things. The official plan itself can stop that if it wanted to. The zoning project that will follow the official plan can stop that if it wanted to. But the councillors need to make that decision and stick to it. And yeah, whether we're seeing enough political will to make sure that we intensify and therefore build walkable neighbourhoods, we haven't seen yet, but I guess by the 27th of October, we'll have a fairly good idea. Oh, that's exciting. No, great to see, and all those great workshops and ways that people can get involved. I know Magdalene had a question. We're going to circle back on that, Magdalene, if it's okay. So I've got a bit of a general discussion coming up after Santa's presentation. So we'll let Cheryl take a little bit of a break, because I know she's been talking for a while. Catch a bit of air, have a little bit of a breather, and we'll come back for a little bit of a general discussion once we hear from Santa. So thanks again, Cheryl, for fabulous work and a great presentation. Very well. So up next, we have Sana Badrudin, and she is the project coordinator over at Ecology Ottawa. Her undying interest in the environmental field stems from her innate love of the natural world and the endless learning possibilities it offers. She considers herself a specialist at being a generalist in this domain. Through public service, academia, and various conservation programs, she has gained experience in renewable energy, Indigenous consultation, environmental assessment, waste and conservation, among others. She now acts as a project coordinator for Ecology Ottawa, working to bring together leaders in climate change and social inclusion to build collaborative capacity and more inclusive environmental grassroots mobilization. So welcome, Sana, to unmute yourself, bring up your screen, and excited to hear about what you're working on.
Awesome. So just give me a second. And, okay, give me 1 second.
No problem. Take your time.
Yeah. There you go. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's coming up. You may just want to go into slideshow mode.
Yeah. Cool.
There you go. Full screen. Yeah, you're all good to go. Thanks for joining us.
And before I begin, I apologize in advance. We've been talking a lot about air quality, and I think it is having a bit of an impact on my current breathing capacity. So if I take a break, it is because I'm trying not to suffocate. So on that note, I'm going to start. So my name is Sana Badruddin. I'm the program coordinator for the Ottawa Climate Equity Initiative, where we're working to build collaborative capacity among social inclusion and climate change leaders and the organizations in Ottawa. This initiative is born out of two realities. One, that climate action is needed to be more effective and faster and stronger in order for it to actually become effective. And two, that people of marginalized communities and social inclusion and racialized communities, lower income, etc., often tend to be the people that face the largest bear the biggest burden of climate and environmental impacts. So the Ottawa Climate Equity Initiative is hoping to address some of that through our program. So before I go too much into detail, I just wanted to acknowledge that the Ottawa Climate Equity Initiative is a program of the Ottawa Community Foundation and funded in part by the Government of Canada. It is being led by the Ottawa Climate Action Fund and is jointly managed with Ecology Ottawa. And my role is to help see this project, which is about a year long, to follow through all the various different pieces from start to finish. So before I go into details about the program itself, I want to actually get into I wanted to communicate a little bit more about the definitions and break down the different terminologies. So what is climate action? To me, climate action means collective action. But what is collective action? Well, I don't know how many of you are familiar with game theory and the tragedy of the commons, which is commonly used to describe the environmental conundrum that we now that we see ourselves in. So as the example goes, there are shepherds each with their own herd of sheep, and all their sheep are able to graze on this common grassy area. It is of the collective benefit that everyone grazes a specific amount and does not overdo it. However, it is of the individual benefit of each particular shepherd to allow their sheep to graze a little bit more or to add another sheep so that they themselves reap the benefits. And the negative consequences to the society as a whole are really, really minor, because it's just one extra sheep where it's just a little bit more grazing. However, when everyone participates, you end up having the tragedy of the commons, where a resource is completely depleted because of this, I guess, tragedy of the commons. Now, the opposite is also true, where when you are trying to do climate action or collective action, the immediate individual burden is high, but the long-term benefit that you see is actually very low unless everyone participates. And therefore, you find yourself in a collective action problem because there is much lower of an incentive to do the quote right thing than there is to do the thing that is going to give you the immediate gratification or satisfaction. So now we go into the next word, equity. Equity is the hottest new word on the block. And I don't know about anyone else here, but every time there's a new word in the social justice sphere, it gives me a lot of anxiety. And it gives me a lot of anxiety because overnight, this new word will suddenly appear in everyone's mission statements. It's in press releases. You can't escape it. And I don't even have like a second, like a hot minute to be able to process the word. And I don't even know if I like the word or if I agree with it, because it has, what if I don't know what the policy implications are, or I haven't thought through them and I don't know if I agree with them. And if I start to use the word, am I suddenly just trying to be someone who's following a trend? Or if I don't use the word, am I not going to be seen as progressive enough? Unfortunately, because it is in the name of my program, I'm stuck with it. So what I need to do is define it and understand it so that I can actually make it do the things that we want it to do as a program. So next slide. So I just took a bunch of really long quotes on equity. As you'll see, they're kind of long and complicated. Systemic equity is a complex combination consciously designed to create, support, and sustain social justice. It's a dynamic process that reinforces and replicates equitable ideas, resources, strategies, blah, blah, blah. Equity denotes fairness and justice in process and results. It often it requires differential treatment of resource redistribution to achieve a level playing field. For everyone, it requires recognizing and addressing barriers to provide opportunity for everyone to thrive. And it means everyone is given the resources they need to succeed. It may appear unfair, but it actively motivates everyone. It actively moves everyone closer to success by leveling the playing field. the last quote that I put here, the reason I put it here is because these previous ones, they talk about the words and the meaning and the intent behind it. But how it plays out in society and how it plays out in real life is completely different. And the fact is that we don't know what equity looks like as a society because we've never actually had it. So, what happens when climate action and equity meet? What happens at this crossroads? Well, before we do that, I just wanted to bring to light something that I think is really important to talk about, which is that climate action and environmental movements themselves exist in silos. And this is partially historical. This is partially because the way that the modern environmental movement in Canada came about is, excessive resource extraction in the West and the North, giving birth to groups like Sierra Club, Greenpeace. You have the Montreal Protocol under Brian Mulroney's government. You have these kinds of things that happened in the beginnings of the modern environmental movement in Canada. And under that historical context, then what you have is, when in community organizing, one of the biggest rules is, not one of the biggest rules, but one of the biggest practices is to find your people, find the people you know, so that you can create and so that you can mobilize and create action where you need it, when you need it. But the problem is that even though the environmental movement has done really well by, naming the issues, by pushing for certain policies, etc., there is not going to be any collective action until we get increased buy-in from society as a whole. And many of these communities have thus far been left out of the conversation. Another thing that happens when climate action and equity meet is that there's a double benefit. One is that, and I spoke on this before, the people that bear the brunt of climate injustice, of climate impacts are people who are often from marginalized communities. And the other thing is that, so, participating or having equitable climate action makes, helps us to move beyond that, I guess. And then the other thing I would say is that having an organization that has that climate equity lens benefits from having a stronger understanding of the issues at hand, and which leads to overall better decision making. So, what is the Ottawa Climate Equity Program doing at the intersections of climate action and equity to bring it how are we bringing it to life, basically? So this program focuses on two main goals. One, social inclusion organizations have a greater capacity to overcome obstacles to engaging their communities in climate action. And two, climate change organizations develop an understanding of the perspectives, values, and concerns of social inclusion groups. So our program has 13 participants. On the environmental side, we have six organizations, and on the social inclusion side, we have 7. On the environmental side, we have the Ottawa Climate Action Fund. We have Ecology Ottawa, which is mostly me. We have the Youth Climate Lab. We have Enviro Center. We have Sustainable Eastern Ontario and the Pembina Institute. On the social inclusion side, we have the Canada-China Culture and Art Association. We have the Ottawa Local Immigration Partnership, the Assembly of 7 Generations, the Jakukan Beat, Parkdale Food Center, Acorn Ottawa, and the City for All Women's Initiative. So what's our strategy? So the first thing I want to direct you to is the picture of grass that I put here. Now, grass, the people of the grass tops, the top of the grass, these are more like senior officials, people that you write letters to, etc. And then the bottom is the roots. These are the common folk, as you will. And then the people in the middle, the grass stalks, those are the kind of like the influencers, the people who can mobilize their networks, and when they work together can actually have a pretty significant impact on local and even regional or international scales. So our program is focusing on this kind of grass stalks area, where we look at kind of key people in the city of Ottawa that have kind of networks and resources and capacity available to them. We are focusing on 3 major streams in this program. 1 is partnerships, 2 is communications, and 3 is community organizing. So partnerships, the focus is looking at executive directors, managers, leaders of these organizations and facilitating, helping create partnerships and collaborations between the social inclusion leaders and the climate change leaders. And the reason why this graphic shows 2 people that are unequal is because one of the things that we've recognized in our facilitations is that not everyone coming to the table is on an equal footing. And this is especially true if you're going to be looking at social inclusion groups partnering with climate change groups who may already be very well funded and well resourced. The next thing is communications. So this is part of the program that actually hasn't started yet. It will be starting in the coming weeks, but we are essentially going to be taking key members of the different organizations involved and co-creating communications that will be distributed to diverse audiences, while at the same time building capacity with local content creators, because that's who we're going to be working with to create these. So that's going to be in the form of, it could be podcasts, it could be advertisements, it could be social media extravaganzas. I don't know anything about social media, sorry. And then the last thing is community organizing. So we are going to be working to equip key members of these organizations with the skills and the capacity for effective community mobilizing around certain campaigns or around certain causes. And so these are our 3 streams. The communications, as I said, hasn't exactly started yet. It's just in process. The community organizing is, in the works. It's getting started. It's looking good. The most progress, however, has been made in the partnerships category, where we've seen certain key themes emerging from the different leaders of these organizations. So where we've seen some I guess a lot of traction and momentum, one of the biggest areas is housing and transport, which is really fits really well with everything that Cheryl was also talking about, these 15-minute neighborhoods, etc. And taking it to, and what's come up is, the idea of redesigning or reimagining a neighborhood where housing and transit are affordable and accessible to everyone that is within that vicinity. Another theme that's emerged is green jobs and green economy, where this is, and specifically one of the executive directors of one of the organizations mentioned this, where this person has a huge network of youth at their disposal, but it hasn't yet really entered their mindset or their mind frame that the green economy exists and that this is a really big area and a potential to get involved in. And that in order to make that leap, we need to find ways to engage these communities. And that doesn't come from having someone who doesn't look like them or doesn't talk to them go in and do a presentation and just goes over everyone's head. It has to do with getting key members within their networks to be trained and be able to bring that message back to those communities. Food security, land security, and access to both is another theme that's emerged, because that is in turn what is going to lead to health and well-being and promote that. And finally, education and awareness. And education and awareness goes both ways. You have the people on the environmental and the climate side needing to learn a little bit more about the issues that are experienced by social inclusion groups, and for social inclusion groups to become a bit more literate in some of the environmental issues. Sorry, oh my God, I'm so sorry. A pigeon just flew into my. Oh my
wow, no worries. Wow.
That terrified me. It flew.
We had a Green Drinks visitor. Wanted to get in on the,
Yeah, he's
I've
so
got a fly in my
cute.
office here, but it's not a pigeon.
Oh my God.
Yeah, all good. Take a minute. Take a moment.
Okay. Wow. I already couldn't breathe. Oh my God.
That's one of our friendliest attendees for Green Drinks, a winged attendee.
I honestly, I hope that the glass didn't kill him. I'll go check on him later, but anyway, okay. Education and awareness, both good things. It needs to happen for everyone. And that is the end of what I'm going to be talking about specifically for my program. This is a very new program, and we haven't really reached the point where we have things that we can measure and provide to you yet. We just hope that everyone who's listening, that you spread the message and that you tell your friends and your networks about this and support us along the journey, and also reach out if you ever have any questions. So the final slide I wanted to leave you with is where I give you advice that you did not ask for. So sometimes when we have these kinds of presentations, we wonder, okay, well, for such a wishy-washy topic like equity, you know, what can I do to help? And I guess I'm gonna leave you with a few takeaways from this. And kind of like Natasha, I'm gonna put a disclaimer that I am not an expert. This is really just based on my own lived experiences and my professional experiences. So the first thing I want you to do as, you know, an environmental organization or someone in the environmental movement is ask yourself, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to look at things from an equity lens? Is it all for an image? And is it going to actually improve your mission? Now, sometimes, you know, you might have an organization or you might be part of a group where you're actually really effective at what you do, and you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. You want to keep doing what you're doing because you do it well. And in that case, you shouldn't feel pressured to hire someone like a person of color, just to hire a person of color. It should be something that maybe there's another route for you to take on the equity side. On a personal note, I will say, you know, I am the only person of color in Ecology Ottawa that is a staff member, but this is true for a lot of environmental organizations. There's not that many, and this is something that we need to accept as a reality. But I also know that I earned this job and I earned this position, so so you know, it fits and it works well. On the other hand, I've been in a situation where I was actually I was requested to essentially run as a candidate for a certain political party in a specific area. Now, this political party, when I was on the phone with them, it came out that I'm of Pakistani heritage, that I'm a practicing Muslim, and that also that I was going to be fasting at some point during the campaign. And I could almost feel like they were hungry to capitalize on that. They were like, oh, you're fasting? Like, that's great. We're going to take pictures. Everyone's going to come together and we're all going to break fast together. And I was like, whoa. I haven't eaten or drank for 18 hours. I don't want to be in some sort of photo op just so you can, you know, make your party look good. And I think that this is important to recognize that people know when it's not genuine and it feels uncomfortable. The next thing I'm going to leave you with is never assume. My high school teacher said, never assume, because you make an ass out of you and me. And it stuck with me because it stuck with me for a very long time. Now, the other thing I want for people to keep in mind is, you know, not everyone is an equity project. I have family that make, you know, $300K a year in the US and vote for Donald Trump because he keeps their taxes low. And I have friends who, like, I have friends who are white men who, you know, grew up in really impoverished, difficult conditions that I have never faced in my life. So I think that sometimes when we see these overlaps with race, income, and class, we tend to try to put everything together, and that's not necessarily the case. The other bullet point I forgot is that never assume that everyone knows what you're talking about. People speak different languages and understand things. Languages, not literal languages, but understand concepts differently. And when we talk about the environment and climate change, not everyone's going to understand it the same way that we do, who are really immersed into that field. And the other thing I would say is for especially those of you who are part of organizations, you know, when you're pushing for certain policies or pushing for certain designs, they can have negative impacts on people on certain communities, and we have to keep those in mind, that there are always going to be losers. One example is the plant-based movement, which it's really, really great to reduce your meat consumption. That's amazing. But if you are eating something made of something that needs to be grown in some developing country that forces Indigenous people off their lands, and you know, and destroys ecosystems, it's probably not as eco-friendly as you might think. And there's also an example of, you know, urban design and green gentrification. The Lachine Canal in Montreal is a great example, and there's a lot of studies that have been done that show that, you know, when you green a place, the price of the real estate goes up, and then you're forcing people out of those areas like who used to live there. And the final thing that I would leave you with is to build genuine relationships. I am of the opinion that, and I know this is kind of an unpopular opinion, but I don't think words matter as much as we think that they do. I think that they can matter, but I think that lately I feel like we're so obsessed with using the right words that it feels like we're just in a race to out-progressive each other, when really what we need to be doing is building genuine relationships with people of different communities, of different color, income, race, and political spectrum. And I think that if you do that, everything else is going to follow suit, whether it's internal hiring practices, you know, renewable energy policies, urban planning and design, everything else will follow suit. So that's pretty much it for my presentation. I apologize if I broke any glass through the screaming at any point. But yeah, that's it. And thank you all for listening.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anna. I really appreciate that. It's great to hear some of the personal side of things as well. Appreciate you opening up and being vulnerable to share some of that. So, and it's great to hear that the equity piece is kind of coming in as well. So, you know, and that's an important piece of this as well. So invite anybody who has any questions to throw them into chat for Sana. I was just wondering, on the influencer side of things, I think that that's something that, you know, I've sort of heard around as well, is that, you know, we sort of need to tap into those influencers. So like an idea of who some of those influencers are, and how do you think that those people are going to be engaged? Is it kind of a network, a group? Is it a quarterly event? Is it something where, you know, they can kind of chat with each other? You know, how are those influencers going to be engaged through this program?
Sorry, so I really apologize. Do you mind just repeating the question again? I think I just was reading
no
the
worries.
question at the
No
same
worries,
time.
no worries. So I was wondering in and around the influencer file, like you've sort of pinpoint that as a big thing, and I've heard that quite a bit from different organizations and initiatives, and you know, the influencers are going to be a big part of this. So I'm wondering, who are the types of influencers? Not that you have to name names, but you know, are they sports people? Are they politicians? What are the different types of influencers that you're after? And then how are you engaging those influencers through this program?
Yeah, so you know, that's actually kind of a tough one, because so the program is engaging kind of the key. So we have these 13 participating organizations, and we are targeting key members of those organizations. So the executive director level, and then some of their community, like their communications people, and some of their key network people that are going to work in community mobilizing. I think that that's a start. But I think that, yeah, these are the people that are more politically or socially active in this sphere. I think there's a huge untapped potential of influencers in, you know, kind of the business side. So I'll use, for example, one of the organizations, they're hosting this really big event for youth, and one of the people, one of the ladies that's organizing this, she's an entrepreneur, and she's showing that she wants to show the youth that people from this background can succeed in this field and can succeed in that. And so I think the business side of things is really important, especially when you're looking at people who are kind of just budding in terms of their professional career. Otherwise, I think that honestly, we're going to have to wait and see how it works, because we're trying to kind of do that right now and work through all of those kinks of, who are the right people. Once we get those, executive directors and their organizations, how do we tap into those key people? And I think that that's going to take a little bit of time and searching to find where those sweet spots are. So that's the best I can give you right now.
No, that's great. It's a very honest answer, and no, that's great. And we've had some comments in chat. Rachel's wondering, how do you avoid making someone feel like they're being spoken down to when trying to avoid assuming they know what you're talking about? So, I noticed, like, if somebody maybe doesn't know too much about environmental impact or something like that, how do you avoid some of those pitfalls as far as sort of talking down or feeling like you're talking down to somebody?
Yeah, and I think this is a little bit of this is a very tricky conversation gymnastics that needs to be played. My advice is ask people about themselves and ask people about their families and their upbringings. That can often give you a really good idea of what their literacy level might be on some of these issues. So there are some people that I know of color that like people of color I know that maybe aren't engaged in all of these like key climate issues and stuff like that, but they have a very outdoorsy family. And if you kind of get to talk to them a little bit about their childhood and what kind of things they did in their upbringing, you can get an idea of you can usually get a decent idea about it. And then after that, I think it just takes a little bit of that mental gymnastics, bringing up topics that are easy and relatable. And I'll give you just one quick example. Sorry. I went to a conference once and there was a lot of Indigenous youth at this conference. So it was a mix of Inuit and First Nations youth that were present. And the entire conference, we kept talking about Indigenous knowledge, and they were just not interested. We kept talking about climate change and Indigenous people are facing climate change, and you could tell that they weren't really interested. But then there was one man, he was a farmer, he was an MP, and he was really, really good at talking, and he knew how to just say the right words. He was like caribou skin, rivers, and he started using words that he knew would have made that was more engaging to these groups, and you could automatically see their eyes, were not blurry anymore. They were focused, they were paying attention. You could see that they were leaning a little bit forward. So I think just try a little bit with the words, play around with it, and then eventually you'll make mistakes along the way, but it's okay. That's part of the process.
Yeah, no, that's some great advice. And I know something that I try is to sort of relate it to your own personal journey. I know for me, 4 or 5 years ago, I wouldn't even known what a heat pump is. And now, I'm kind of into that knowledge, but not everybody's there yet, right? So it's sort of, kind of a combination of curiosity and understanding that people are on different sort of paths on the journey, and some people are a bit further down with their knowledge, but others are sort of still keen to know. So great questions there. Great presentation, Sana. I'll just remind you to stop share as we go into sort of a bit more of the general discussion here. We can see everybody on the screen now. This is a great time if people do want to ask any follow-up questions. Basically, just raise your hand. Down at the bottom there is a reaction. And if you raise your hand or put a thumbs up or any any of those reactions, I'll unmute you so you can ask your question to the panel, and we'll have a bit of time for follow-up questions. I had a bit of a follow-up question. So mine was, in light of the IPCC report, you know, that we were sort of seeing that, you know, 2050 is moot. I think everybody was on this 2050 path sort of looks a bit silly now, because we see that, you know, we can't wait till 2050 for all this stuff. It's, you know, even waiting till 2030 is a bit slow. So, you know, in light of this report, I'm wondering what each of you think, and you can pick one or two things. What are something or one thing or two things that the everyday citizen in Ottawa can do to affect climate change on a personal level? So we haven't heard from Natasha for a while, so why don't we go in order of when everyone presented? So we'll go Natasha, Cheryl, and Santa. So one or two things that people can do on a very individual level to help affect climate change, especially in light of the new IPCC report.
Thanks. That's a really good question. There's so many different individual actions you can take, and I would encourage everyone to get really politically involved. To be honest, we need elected officials who are science literate and are pushing for climate action and climate funding. I would encourage people to, you know, obviously everyone only has a certain amount of bandwidth for the amount of things that they can do. And if it's between, I was listening to a podcast one time and they were talking about, if you have to choose between, you know, driving across town to going to the grocery store that sells all organic produce, or driving to attend your city hall event that evening, it might be worth your while to pick that city hall event, and don't stop talking about it. Talk about it with everyone at your dinner table. Really get into those hard conversations is something that I think is really, really important going forward.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. You know, sort of spreading the knowledge, spreading the excitement, spreading the enthusiasm, and you know, just talking, and that can be an effective tool as well. Cheryl, over to you for one or two things that you think people can do on an individual level to affect climate change here at home.
Well, I think on the basis of my presentation, I'm going to have to say, try to leave the car at home, go for a walk, and it will help your mental health, your physical health, and hopefully you'll be able to find some little green spaces around you, and then you can just breathe in the nice clean air that's in those green spaces. Just try, if you can, for as long as the summer lasts, to avoid the car. That's what I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I bike to work, bike today, obviously had to bring a change into work, but you know, I feel guilty if I don't bike in at least 75% of the time. So I'm trying to, if I'm in the office 4 or 5 days, then at least 3 of those I'm biking, kind of thing. So no, that's a great point. Santa, over to you for an action or two that people can take at the local level here.
For sure. This has nothing to do with my presentation, but I am a huge believer that we already have enough things. We already have enough things, and we don't need to continue making things. So I highly encourage people to buy secondhand clothes. I think that this is one of the biggest things you can do, not just for the climate, but for the environment in general. You don't need to buy new clothes. There are plenty of shops and plenty of places that sell high quality, lightly used items. You need to buy furniture or buy everything you can buy secondhand as much as you humanly possibly can, and purchase foods that are local and in season. Those are the things that I do on a personal level that I think are profoundly important.
Yeah, no, that's great. Really good, really important point about clothing and, you know, supporting some of those secondhand places. I know somewhere like Ragtime downtown is a great one. I try to go into once in a while and find some stuff. So no, those are all great suggestions. So I don't see any other follow-up questions from the crowd. So everyone's kind of hot probably and a little bit sweaty, but those are some great points. I want to kind of go around for some final words, and also just a couple of things that you're excited about in the next couple of months in the fall. So some final words and a couple of things that you're excited about that you're working on, or you know, could be something that like a workshop coming up, or an event or a petition. Back over to you, Natasha, for some final words and a couple of things that you're looking forward to this fall.
Oh, wow. So many come to mind, actually. First of all, thank you so much for having us. This was really great and really great discussions. One of the things I'm looking forward to the most is hitting our 15,000 tree target to distribute our 15,000 trees. We're almost there already, so that's really exciting. Another thing I'm really looking forward to is that we're actually, we're going to be working with cafes in the fall, September, October-ish on their, I believe it's their neighborhood canopy regeneration project. So we're going to be doing some community outreach and talking more to homeowners and city staff about how we can get more tree coverage in certain neighborhoods that I don't think have been picked yet, but I'm really looking forward to that project.
Yeah, absolutely. Congrats on that tree, Mark. And, you know, it looks like it's something that you're going to hit. So well done.
Thank you.
Cheryl, over to you. I know you've got a lot of stuff going on, so it should be easy to pick. What are you excited about for this fall?
So the almost next thing coming up is the Councillor Sean Menard is going to bring a motion for the Environment Committee in September about phasing out gas plants, which is absolutely critical in our move away from fossil fuels, especially as we've been saying in the IPCC report. And I'm hoping that that is then going to transition nicely into supporting a treaty for fossil fuel non-proliferation, which is an international movement, and we're hoping that one of the councillors will pick it up as a motion right here in Ottawa. And we are also going to be working on a campaign we're going to call Protect the Plan, which is looking at the complete gulf between what we say we need to do in the Energy Evolution Climate Plan and the funding that the council has not put towards any kind of climate mitigation. So yeah, they are the things I'm most looking forward to in the fall.
Nice, yeah, some great stuff, and we'll be watching with interest. So great work on that, and thanks again for joining us. Santa, I know it's a bit of a new program that you're heading up. What are some things that you're looking forward to this fall?
So actually the thing that I'm looking forward to the most in this program is creating communications, co-creating communications with environmental and social inclusion groups and local content creators. I think that this is where we're going to see the most kind of tangible product, where we're going to be able to actually distribute these creations to different audiences and see how they respond, see if we're really tapping into their interests and into their and be able to motivate them. So that's what I'm really interested in that's going to be upcoming. But otherwise, the program is just ongoing, lots of different things coming up here and there. So it's still a work in progress.
That's great. Well, there's some fabulous stuff that everybody's working on. I'm glad that no one said the federal election. So I don't know who's looking forward to that. I know I'm not, but no, that's great. I'd say, you know, I'm really inspired by the three of you. It's great to spotlight. I want to thank you again for taking the time to come. And, you know, it seems like you've got a lot on your plates. So, you know, being able to take a couple hours and come talk to us about what you're up to is great. We are recording, so we will put a copy of that out next week. I want to remind everybody that we're back Thursday, September 9th. We've got a very special edition featuring some of the pioneers pioneers of hempcrete. And if you don't know what hempcrete is, you can come and learn all about it. It's going to be a bit of a game changer in the built environment. So make sure you sign up for that. It will be space limited on that one, so make sure you grab your spot. Once again, thanks so much to all the ladies here of Ecology Ottawa and your whole organization for the amazing work you're doing. And I know we'll stay in touch through the fall, and we'll keep everybody posted through our SmartNet channels of all the great stuff going on. So once again, thanks everybody for joining us for Virtual Green Drinks August. We'll hope to see you again in September. I am Nick for SmartNet Alliance, and I hope you have a great night.